Hey there, Steve here. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for enrolling into the School of Math Rock, where over the next couple of hours, I'll help you overcome the massive initial learning hump when it comes to learning math rock style guitar. But by the end of this, you'll have all of the essentials under your belt, and you'll be ready to start playing and writing your own math rock style songs. To do this, I've separated the course into 4 lessons. First, you'll roll into Math Rock 101 class, where you will learn the essential skills to get you started. From there, you'll graduate into the Techniques class, where you'll learn the 3 essential math rock guitar techniques. From there, you'll take a deep dive into the beautiful world of alternate tunings in our alternate tuning class. And lastly, graduate into your final class, where you'll learn how to write math rock style songs. Right, you might want to bookmark this video so you can come back to it later. And let's begin your journey by looking at 7 must-know math rock chords. Today, I'm going to level up your chord knowledge and we're going to capture the essence and sound of math rock through these chords. So to do this, we're going to take a chord that you already know. Nice, safe sounding C major chord. And now we're going to make it tell a story. You can hear that difference already, and more importantly, I hope you can feel that difference as well. This chord tells a story versus this one. Nice and pleasant. Sorry, I got carried away. I get too excited about these things, but yeah, this chord makes you feel something because it contains dissonance, and dissonance doesn't mean it has to sound bad. In that C major 9 chord, got that nasty interval going on, but when we bring the context of the rest of the chord, it's kind of hidden in there, but that's what makes it feel something. And that's largely what captures the math rock sound. It is this use of dissonance within chords. Now, what you need to keep in mind, math rock guitarists and Midwest emo, these are often lumped together. But these guitarists make use of lots of different tunings, but the application is still the same. We still get this dissonance within the chords, but for the sake of today, going to stay in standard tuning. But here are some examples of the same concept in FACGCE tuning. And DAEA C# E tuning. So through those 2 quick examples there, hopefully you can see that we can create dissonance through other and unique, interesting ways. So now we have some essential background information. Hopefully you have a better understanding now of what makes math rock chords different from more conventional chords, let's say. Let's jump into the next section, the meat and potatoes, the part you've been waiting for. We'll learn some chords. Do keep in mind that math rock bands make use of many different chords, many different tunings, but these chords are an excellent starting place for you. We're going to look at major 9 chords and minor 9 chords. And I played a minor 9 when I got carried away in the introduction there, but we'll come back to that soon in a second. But for now, let's go back to the C major 9 shape. I want to teach you this in 3 places on the fretboard, so no matter where you are, it's going to be one of those major 9 chords available to you. So we've got this initial C major 9 position here. We can also play it from the root on the E string as well. And there's also an availability for us to play it from the D string root as well. And now, let's move over to one of my favourite shapes, the minor 9 shape. This initial shape, and then this one. And then on the D string. So yeah, like that. I want to get carried away. I want to teach you loads of chords, but I think that's a good place for you to start from. One final thing I want to leave you with, an added extra bonus for you for waiting around learning these chords, is often in math rock, we don't always strum the chords. One big thing that we do is arpeggiation. Arpeggiation is playing single notes of the chords. So what I want you to leave you with today is a picking pattern I want you to practice along with these chords, and I'll give you a sample chord progression as well. So this progression is going to go C major 9, E minor 9, then we're going to end on a G major 9. And the pattern goes like this. I'll play it slowly for you, and I want you to copy this picking pattern. If we speed that up, we get this like typical Japanese kind of math rock arpeggio picking pattern. There's some chords for you to get started on your math rock journey. A fun tidbit, I had a stuffed up nose in that video, which you could probably tell, but math rock never takes a rest. Also, can't wait to get into the later sections of this course where we'll dive into the world of that FACGCE tuning and the DAEAC C# E tuning. But you haven't seen any of these chords in action in math rock style songs yet. So here's a video that took me many takes to get right, but it demonstrates a lot of the chords you saw in action. The truth about math rock chords is that they're largely just jazz chords, but used in different and unique ways. And that's okay. And here's a few ways that we can use them. We could create some of the coolest Japanese off-kilter math rock riffs, or we can create some really cool math prog style chord progressions too, inspiring new generations to pick up the guitar. We can also use them as what we would call shell chords. We strip them back to their essential notes. These are wonderful as alternatives to power chords. But we could use them to just create this, like fun little section within a song with a nice chord progression. Or we could use them for making finger tapping riffs too. God, that was hard not to look. You don't know how many takes it took me to get that video done. I wanted to challenge myself to see if I could maintain eye contact while I was playing those ideas. Turned out the tricky part was actually talking and playing at the same time. I don't expect you to be able to learn and play those songs right away that you just saw. So instead, I recommend you start with learning some common math rock strumming patterns. Which brings us on to our next two videos, which you will learn some inspiring, actionable math rock style strumming patterns in 4/4 time and 3/4 time. Today, I would like to teach you 3 useful strumming patterns for math rock in 4/4 time. These are based on ideas that you'll hear in math rock songs, so there'll be variations of them. And yes, I did say 4/4 time. The strumming patterns that I'm going to show you today, they make use of syncopation. We're going to put the accent in less traditional places, and hence why it'll have more of a math rock kind of feel to it. Okay, so I'm going to use the same 3 chords for each example that I show you today. So this is an F major 9, D minor 9, and a C major 9. So our first strumming pattern has lots of energy and it's great for an intro to a song, for example. And basically we're going to displace this, we're going to put an accent on the E of the 2nd and the 4th beat, and it will sound like this. So I feel like this strumming pattern has a lot of energy to it. And you could even accent that offbeat even more by doing some palm muting. And lastly, we could add in some dead notes. This is where we're not playing the chord, but we're hitting the strings in a rhythmic manner. Like this. And basically we get the intro that sounds something similar to Birdhouse by Tiny Moving Parts. All right, so moving on to our second example. This one has a bit more space to it. To me, it feels more like a, like a big section within a song or even the introduction. And the rhythm goes like this. So I feel this progression works best with like some big chords. There's a bit more space in it, and I really think this is a good rhythm. There's an example that's similar to this by Gulfer, the band Gulfer, and I think the song's called Heat Wave. But instead we hold the and longer, and then we add 2 dead notes at the end. So I'll demonstrate that quickly. Alright, so last one, we're actually going to do a rhythm, a strumming pattern for 2 guitar parts. So I think this is probably the first time I've tackled something like this on the channel. So for those who are looking for some content with 2 guitars, we've finally got some here. Basically, this progression is based around that left, right kind of feel you get with guitars, where it pans left and right when the guitars play individually from each other. Usually what will happen in those kind of examples is there's a unison part where both the guitars are playing the same rhythm, and then they will go on the offbeat of each other, and then they'll come back together. An example will help, and that's what I'll show you right now. So in this example, basically we're on the beat for each one of them. We're playing staccato, it means we're playing short notes. And then as you heard in the next bar in the example you just saw, one guitar plays on the beat, so 1, 2, 3. And the other guitar plays on the offbeat, 1 and 2 and 3 and you get this lovely, left and right thing going on in your headphones there or your speakers, which I think sounds wonderful. Right, hope you're all inspired by those strumming patterns. I particularly enjoyed making the 3/4 strumming pattern video. There were some awesome ideas in that one. But where do you go from here? Well, this brings us on to our final video about the basics of math rock guitar. And it's now time to learn some of the newbie friendly riffs. And lucky for you, I've lined up 5 introductory math rock riffs, and I've included tabs so you can learn them much more quickly. Have fun. So for the first riff, we're going to start with the song The Detail by the British math rock band Delta Sleep. I think this is a wonderful place to start. It's this angular kind of repeating phrase that you hear in the introduction, and there's two guitar parts going on here. We've got Glenn and Devon's part. We're going to be focusing on Glenn's part for this riff, and it's this minor pentatonic kind of run. It sounds quite simple there, it might sound quite easy, but the timing is quite tricky, and it becomes even more tricky when we consider Devon's part as well, because it's slightly off kilter with it. It's this eighth note difference between the two, so that it has this kind of choppy feel between the two, and that adds to that feeling of being uneven. And I'll take you through this riff. So starting on the 9th fret here, I want you to use your ring finger. It's going to make it easier to pick through this riff. And then come to your index finger up here, then your ring finger again. Now you can use your middle finger, little finger, and lastly your index finger here again. So that is the riff, that's the repeating phrase, but there are some other things we need to do. One thing is we need to use the technique of palm muting. So we're going to rest our palm lightly on the bridge here to give a dead kind of sound. And there's another thing we need to do as well. We need to play in a staccato style. So we're going to play the notes short and quickly, like so. But you're also going to use that palm mute technique at the same time. And then at the end of the riff, there's this awesome run. And when you put the two parts together, they sound like this. Okay, so moving on to our second riff, we have the band Truco. So for this riff, it's an excellent example of some of the chords that are used in math rock, especially by some more of the Japanese math rock bands. It's also an excellent example, a way to practice hybrid picking. So here we're going to use the pick and two of our fingers. And lastly, it's the first introduction, it's our introduction to our first odd time signature of 5/4. So you maybe, well, everyone's familiar with that traditional kind of 4/4 pulse in a song, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we're going to have bars of 5/4, so we're going to add an extra pulse to each bar division. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can feel that's already starting to feel, you know, a little bit well, odd compared to 4/4. Also, the way the chords cycle over this 5/4 bar phrases as well, we'll see, I'll get back to that in a moment, but it also makes it a bit more of an odd feel as well. So, what are the chords? We're going to start with this F sharp minor style chord, D dominant chord, and then the C sharp minor chord. So what I would like you to do first is become comfortable with cycling between those chord shapes. So I've given you the fingering as well on the chord shapes to help you there. The next thing we're going to do is pick through these chords. At first I'd like you to do this with just the pick. So we're going to pick all 4 notes for each of the chords. Then to this D shape. And then the C sharp minor shape. But as you hear, this riff is quite quick, and to make it easier we can use hybrid picking. And we're going to follow the same pattern to make this easy for you. So the first 2 strings I want you to pick with your pick. You can just go down like that. And then the last 2 strings you're going to use your middle and your ring finger to pick. And then we're going to repeat that same pattern for the other 2 chords as well. Pick the top 2 strings and then use your fingers to do the last 2 strings. The last thing, to come back to that 5/4 count. These three chords are cycling over that 5/4 count in such a manner that they're displaced every time. It's wonderful. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I hope you enjoyed the counting there, but I think that serves the point. They fall in different places because it's a cycle of 3 over over that 5/4 progression. And the last thing is that there's this natural harmonic at the end of the riff. To do that, you want to lay your index finger over the 5th fret here, at the actual fret wire itself. You're just going to touch the strings lightly, and then you're going to pick them with your pick at the same time. So moving on to our third riff, we have the band Mountains with the song Restart, so a riff from that song. A bit of a shameless plug, this is one of my own band's songs. Nevertheless, I think it serves as an excellent introductory example to the finger tapping technique that's often associated with math rock and is used by a lot of math rock guitarists. So for this one, you're going to put down the pick, you're going to use just your fingers, you're going to use an A bar chord shape, you're going to strum that bar shape, use your thumb for this one. And you're going to use your index and your middle finger to do all of the tapping. Every time you tap, you're going to pull off as well. And you might find it's a little difficult to, have stability here. So what I recommend is anchor your thumb on the underside of the neck here, and that's going to really help you just play this riff and be more stable. So strum the chord, keep that ringing, bring your thumb at the back of the neck here, anchor it there, and then you can tap with your fingers along the fretboard. Like so. So moving on to our fourth riff, no video about math rock riffs would be complete without the band TTNG, and I tried to find one that was simple enough that I feel like beginners could get through. And the song we're going to be using is Elk, and this is an excellent example of unconventional melodies, really off-feeling melody, but also wonderful at the same time. And it's also an excellent example of using alternate tunings, which is what we use a lot in math rock. Well, it's used by a lot of math rock guitarists. This is where we tune the guitar to some kind of chord. We tune something different from standard tuning. So let's do this together so we get a good example. So for this one, we're in the tuning of D, A, D, F sharp, A, E. Now I'll put my tuner on and we'll do this together. So our first string is going to come down from E to D. Get that in this, as in tune as possible. Then we're going to stick with our A. The D is going to stay the same. Then our G string is going to come down to F sharp. So it's going to come down one semitone. And our B is going to come down to A. So it's going to come down 2 semitones, a whole tone of our E. And then we have this tuning. Which you would all agree sounds really wonderful. So I digress, I get lost in these kind of tunings, they do sound very nice. So for this one, what I'd like you to do is practice the finger shapes for the three sections I would break this riff into. So you've got your first shape here, which is going to use your little finger on the 5th fret, your index on the 2nd fret here. That's your first chord shape. The second one is going to use open strings on the 4th fret here. The last one, I want you to use, a bit tricky, but use your little finger on the 9th fret here, sorry, use your ring finger on the 9th fret here, and then your little finger on the 10th, and then your index finger is going to slide up from the 7th to the 8th, and then I want you to use your middle finger on the 9th fret here, and you have... That last chord shape is the trickiest one, but if you take your time, you will become familiar, it will become easier for you. So... And then you can start slowly working your way through the riff. I recommend breaking it into those 3 chords. Just digesting it in that way is going to make it much easier. You know, learn this bit, learn this bit, learn this bit, put it all together at the end. Got to talk about the picking hand, sorry. Recommend dedicating 1 finger per string here, so that's going to make it easier to learn as well. So my thumb, for example, is going to take care of these lower strings, and then my other fingers are just going to stick to a particular string for each part of this progression. Okay, so moving on to our 5th and final riff, we have the precursor to the song FC Premix by the band For La Troy. As you can see, the name is a bit silly on this one, so I'm not going to try and say all that one. But nevertheless, it's an excellent example of some of the chords that you're going to see in math rock, especially the shell chord versions. For example, instead of playing this full minor 7 chord, we could play this instead. So we get the essential notes, but it's a stripped down version of the chord. And the chords in this song are an excellent example of the commonly used shell chords that you'll hear in math rock. So I'll teach you the chords. I want you to think about the most comfortable fingering. I will suggest that on the chord charts as well. Most comfortable fingering to move through the riffs, through the chords that are in this riff. And I want you to repeat fingering for similar chords to obviously make things easier for you. This song does use delay, so I've put a little bit of delay on, but keep in mind it's just simple chord strums. So we've got our A minor chord here, then our F major chord, our E minor chord, and lastly a D minor chord. And then there's this bend, and to do this bend I'd like you to use your ring finger, but I want you to support that bend, and you should try to support all bends with other fingers. So you're going to use your index and your middle finger here behind the ring finger to bend up, and you want to bend to this C note. You can check you're getting the right note that way. You're going to bend up, come back down. See, I went too high there, right? So please enjoy the example. I want to say thank you for watching the video if you're still here. I really want to help you learn math rock guitar. If you're new to this, then check out my other videos. Got plenty of stuff to help you, as well as my math rock guitar ebook. Thanks everyone, and see you in the next video. Goodbye. So what did you think to those riffs? Did any grab your attention? I recommend learning the ones that did, because in my experience, these are usually the ones that make their way into our own playing style, due to them being more in line with our inner desires. But before we move on to the next class, I want to slip in a video on how to dial in your rig for decent math rock and Midwest emo tone. So the following video will take you through the basics, and keep in mind you can apply all of the information I'm about to show you to whatever rig that you are currently using. Have you ever had the experience of dialing in your amp to where it sounds good, and stepping on your favourite overdrive or distortion pedals only to have it all sound like a big mushy mess? I certainly have, and this is something that's taken me really years of messing around with amps and pedals to fix for myself. So in today's video I want to walk you through how I set up my rig to get a decent sound without it all sounding like a big mess. But what do a lot of guitarists get wrong about setting their amp? And are you doing this too? Well, this is a lesson I learned a long time ago. It all started when I was playing shows most weekends with my band. I'd find myself at different amps at different shows, and a lot of the time it's just in-house amps, and they're never the best quality. And I find myself spending ages trying to dial in the volume, the gain and tone, trying to get a half decent sound out of these amps. But when I went to click on my overdrives and my compressors and so on, it all just sounded like a big mess. This used to drive me crazy until one day a video popped up in my feed about dialing in pedals for amplifiers. I can't remember the exact video, but it was from the channel That Pedal Show. And basically I learned that in the pursuit of trying to dial in this amp, I've been turning the gain and the volume up too much, and basically the amp had nowhere more to go. So whenever I stepped on a pedal, I was just adding more distortion and more overdrive. So to demonstrate this in action, I've got my pedal board set up here, and I'll go through it with you through this video. But my amplifier that I'm using today is an amp simulation pedal by Universal Audio, and this is called the Dream 65, and it's a recreation of a Fender Deluxe reverb amplifier. And we have on the top here is the volume, which is essentially the gain into the amp. So if I turn that on and if I bring the volume up, you'll hear how it gets distorted. So let's say at a show you had it somewhere around here, and then you go to kick on your overdrive. Now it's getting a bit too much. So what we should do instead, and this applies to real amplifiers as well, is to bring that volume down and use it so we've got a bit of headroom. So now basically whenever I boost any overdrives or volume into the pedal, it's not going to clip so quickly and not overdrive so fast. And there are two main reasons I do this. One, because I want to control all of the sound and sculpt my sound with my pedal board here, and this works for whenever I play shows, which I haven't done in quite a while, I must admit, but it means that I can just set whatever amplifier is at that show, set it to have a bit of headroom on it, and then set the tone relatively flat, and then use my pedals to do the rest of the work. And with my setup here, there is another consideration. My volume is coming out of this pedal into my interface. So what I've done is made sure the volume is low as possible on my interface, and I'm using the volume from this to drive the signal into the interface, into my computer, and I'm making sure that it's not clipping along the way. So you will need to balance that too. So it's worth pointing out, I'm using my Telecaster here, and my sound is all based around this middle pickup here. So I'm sculpting my sound where it hasn't got too much lows and it hasn't got too much highs. So depending on your guitar, if you've got humbuckers like behind me here, or if you predominantly play on the bridge or the neck or whichever position you're using, you will have to adjust your sound for that. But now I've got my amp set up where I know I've got a bit of headroom, I know I've got a bit of space to go into. I've got my reverb after here, because I feel like an amplifier is never that fun when it's a dry sound like that. This amp actually has spring reverb built in, but I prefer the plate reverb sound myself. And I'm not using that clean sound, like I said, it's just there to provide a bass that I can work and put everything on top. So the first thing I like to do is introduce the compressor to my chain, and I put that actually after all of my drive pedals here. So I've got my overdrive and a higher gain overdrive, and I've got my distortion pedal here. That's how I like to have it. I've got 3 different sounds I can use, and these are all going into the compressor pedal here, which is just providing kind of more of a compressed valve style amplifier to the feel, and it also helps with me with finger tapping and just balancing out
picking parts like so. And this is a fantastic trick for solid state amps. So if you've got a solid state amp, by introducing a compressor, you can get the feeling of the compression that you would naturally get from a valve amplifier. So that's a great way, especially if you're playing shows where you're using solid state amplifiers, or if that's what you've got at home. Everything that I'm showing you here, by the way, today as well, you can find more affordable versions of that as well. I'll leave a bunch of different budget levels in the description below this video. So that compressed sound is not really boosting the volume you hear. Maybe it is a little bit, but I'm just squashing the sound a bit. And for me, that's too much of a clean sound. So what I like to do is introduce my first pedal as my clean sound, as my bass tone, let's say, and it's going to add a bit of a sparkly overdrive to the sound. It's just got that bit of, just that little bit of fizzle on the drive sound there. This is a Mythos Herculean overdrive pedal, and the reason I got this, to be honest, is I want 3 overdrive sounds, and I wanted to take up one less power supply on my on the 8s that I can have available here. More pedals coming soon here, I should say. But this is basically a Bluesbreaker style overdrive, and it's like a really clean, nice little transparent overdrive sound. So again, boosting the level ever so much there. I was going to say, if you've watched older videos of mine, I've got some pedals hiding down here, and there's a good reason for that. This is the JHS Morning Glory, which is basically the same circuit as this right side of the pedal here. And that's a great, I've used it for years, to be honest, this pedal. I've never sold one, so since I've had that, it's a very good pedal. Just like I said, I found that this sounds exactly the same, and I can have the other pedal, which I'll show you in a second. A cheaper alternative that I used to use before getting the JHS one was this NUX Morningstar, which again is like a Bluesbreaker style overdrive, and it's got this boost mode in it that takes it more into like what would say, like a Boss Blues Driver, Texas kind of driven sound instead. And what I'd like to put on top of that is a higher gain overdrive for when I'm doing more heavier stuff. And again, I want it to sound good with the middle pickup selector here. So this is the tone I've dialed in. And stuff like this as well. And important to me was I wanted to get an overdrive that didn't get too mushy, because I use a lot of like these, major 7 intervals, which clash a lot, and the more gain you add to that, the messier it can become, and especially balancing it with the headroom that you've got in your amplifier. But I think those two stack quite well, and that's what the sound I've got at the moment. So I won't stack another distortion on top of that, I should say. I'll keep this always on as my bass sound. And then the pedal after that is this JHS Andy Timmons signature overdrive, and this one doesn't suit on the middle pickup selector. I find it's just this really good bridge sound. It's really thick and meaty, and again, I don't really tend to use it a lot in my own music, but I like Andy Timmons and I like learning his songs, and I use it as a high gain overdrive as well. So here's the before sound. And I use that and I use that with the, wherever it is, the strap behind me, not really with the Telecaster here, but I find it's a great, really good distortion as well. course, a lot of noise on single coil pickups there. But is there more that I could show you? Well, I think for now, that's all I want, is just setting up these 3 different sounds that I like to use. And like I said, I do want to add a delay to this kind of thing, but it's not really important to what I'm trying to demonstrate you today. All I'm trying to say is that think about the headroom on your amplifier if you're using your pedals into it. And like I said, it's the same if you're using an actual amplifier or using a plugin on your DAW as well. Congratulations, you have graduated Math Rock Essentials class, and now you're ready to begin your next class, where we'll take a look at the common guitar techniques used in math rock. The next module will teach you the core guitar techniques often used in math rock, as well as a crucial technique that ties them all together. By the way, if you'd like to go deeper into learning the essentials of math rock chords, then be sure to check out my Math Rock and Midwest Emo Chords Essential course. In there, I'll give you guided tuition on the essential chords, progressions, and strumming patterns. So if you're interested in that, check a link in the description to learn more. Thank you. So let's get to your next class. And in your first lesson, I'll give you an overview of those 3 essential guitar techniques you'll need to learn. See you on the other side. 3 techniques that you need to know to get started with math rock, and I'll give you an exercise for each one. So besides the techniques that we should be all learning, such as like alternate picking, hammer on and pull off, slides, bends, these kind of things, there are 3 techniques that are commonly used by guitarists who play math rock. And these 3 techniques are, the most synonymous one is going to be finger tapping, then we have finger picking, and then lastly we have something called hybrid picking, which is one of my favorite techniques. Though these 3 techniques are commonly used, they are by no means, they don't have their roots in this style of, in the style of math rock. However, the way that guitarists who play math rock have used them and developed them and expanded on them is what makes them synonymous with the style. So for example, if you take a look at the technical yet groovy finger tapping riffs of Marcus Mehner, or we could look at the wonderful, wizardly smooth flowing, like water tapping riffs of Yvette Young. For finger picking, we need to look no further than basically Tim Collis of TTNG for his finger twisting, finger picking riffs. And lastly, hybrid picking just makes it so much more easier to play a lot of string skipping riffs, and it's often used by guitarists who play like a blend of like math rock and prog, like that math prog style. Of course, there are many more examples that I could give. There are just so many talented guitarists who are playing math rock. However, I believe the examples I just gave there will suffice to show what is achievable by using these techniques. So for finger tapping, this is a 2-handed tapping exercise. That's a great place to start. We're going to start on the low E string on the 8th fret with your index finger, and I want you to hammer on from nowhere. So basically tap. Then walk up chromatically with your other fingers. So on the 9th fret, we'll have your middle finger, 10th fret, your ring finger, and 11th fret, your little finger. So walk up like this. When you get to the 11th fret, we'll introduce our other hand on the 12th fret and with our index finger, and we'll walk up chromatically again. So 12, 13, 14, and 15. So all together. When you're comfortable there, you can walk up all of the other strings too. So some tips for this one. With your fretting hand, we can use the underneath of our index finger to rest lightly on the strings to mute any unwanted string ring. You're going to want to develop this as you practice this exercise, as you develop this technique. So if we don't do this, it would sound, we'll get a lot of string ring. Versus. So this really helps keep a lid on things. It keeps it much more smooth and muted in that regard. We can do the same again when we introduce the next part of the tapping. We can still use this hand as a mute. With your strumming hand, you can rest your thumb on the side of the neck here as an anchor, and this will help just make things easier for you when you tap and more comfortable. And lastly, what I like to do is put my ring finger on top of my little finger when I tap with this little finger, just to give it some more oomph, to give it some more strength. Alright, so moving on to finger picking. For this one, we're going to concentrate on developing the technique, on developing dexterity. So we're going to ignore fretting at the moment, playing any chords, any riffs, anything like that. And we're just going to concentrate on developing this hand. To do this, we're going to use the metronome, and we're going to use different spacings of groupings of notes. So we're going to start with the thumb, and then we'll work up through our other fingers. I'd like you to start on the A string for this one. And if you have a metronome, you can play on each of the beats. So if it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to slowly introduce a finger by finger. So next we can have an index finger. Now we'll do a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and rhythm. Practice that. When you're feeling comfortable with that, now you can introduce your middle finger, and now we'll do a triplet rhythm. So like triplet, triplet, triplet. And then next you can introduce your ring finger. We're going to do a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a rhythm for this one. Lastly, we're going to introduce the little finger, and that gives us 5. So we're going to have to play quintuplets, so 5 beats in the space of 1. So to do this, you can count 1E and a B, something like that. So 1E and a B, 2E and a B, 3E and a B. You get this really odd feel from it. Lastly, looking at hybrid picking. So for this one, like I said, it's my favorite technique. Really good for string skipping. You get best of both worlds. You know, you can strum with a pick, you can pick with your fingers, and you can do stuff like this. Which would be really difficult to do with just a pick. You know, that much string skipping. So for this one, we're going to alternate between the pick and each finger to get that string skipping pattern, to start getting familiar with this exercise. So you're going to play the low E with the pick, and then use your middle finger on the D string and alternate between those two. Now you can do the same with your middle ring finger, but this time with the G string. And lastly, with B string, E and B string with your little finger. So now you're familiar with the basics of these techniques. The next 3 videos in this module go into more detail about each one of them. And by the end of it, you'll have a solid foundation to be able to perform all 3 of these techniques. Let's begin with learning some more about the finger picking technique. This finger picking pattern, you're going to rest the palm of your hand on the bridge. Make sure you're not muting the strings. And you're going to use 1 finger per string here. So you're going to use your thumb on the A string, your index on the D string, your middle finger on the G string, and your ring finger on the B string. So that way you're not having to think about where each finger is all the time. They're just going to be dedicated to those strings as we move through these 3 chord shapes. It's a 7/8 picking pattern, just to give it a math rock kind of flair, and I'll play the pattern slowly for you first. So I really want you to get mesmerized with this picking pattern. Keep going through it, take it slowly, but concentrate not on the chords that you're playing, but on the motion that you're using down here. Make sure you're not tensing up, and just get mesmerized by it. It will get so ingrained into your muscle memory that it will just become easier for you every time that you do this. Then you can start to add other exercises as well, and then that'll get you on that journey to playing all of those finger twisting licks, which is what we want to do. And eventually you won't really be thinking about it. So moving on, here's a more in-depth lesson on hybrid picking, complete with a fun, bouncy exercise for you. So how can you learn this technique? Well, I want you to get started with this simple triplet kind of exercise. You're going to pick the low E string, and then you're going to use your middle and your ring finger to play the rest of the strings. If you were to play that with a pick, you'll notice how much more effort you have to put in to do all the string skipping. Can't even play it right, but yeah. So string, you get a different sound of course, but hybrid picking just makes it so much easier, right? Did you enjoy bouncing along to that riff? I'd say hybrid picking is one of my favorite techniques, and I think you'll love it too, given you time to develop it. So now it's time to tackle the trickiest technique in math rock, and that is finger tapping. But don't worry, even though this exercise looks quite challenging at first glance, I break it down and give you step-by-step guidance in the video on how to play it. Hey there, Steve here, hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. Here, we're all about helping each other get better at math rock and Midwest emo style guitar. This is the exercise I wish I could give to my younger self because it covers so many of the fundamentals that we need to develop when learning math rock finger tapping. I recently made this exercise when I was developing my new course, a course that covers the fundamentals of math rock finger tapping. And the main idea behind this course was a course that I could give to my younger, less experienced self and help them learn finger tapping 10 times faster than I did. But this is one of the exercises that I didn't include in that course, and you can use that today. So today I'll share why I believe this is such a powerful exercise for you getting better at finger tapping. And I'll share a secret behind playing this exercise that when you notice it, it'll click into place and you'll say something like,
"Oh yeah, it really is that simple to play."
So why do I consider this a powerful exercise? Well, to understand the answer, first we need to understand what so many guitarists get wrong when they start learning the math rock style finger tapping technique. You see, they often follow a pattern like this. They'll hear a tapping riff that they really like, be inspired, get all fired up, go home, find a tab for that song, spend ages learning it, only end up being frustrated with their version sounding like a big mess. The problem here is that, like any new skill that we learn, it's best to master the basics of that technique first before diving into the deep end. And it's the simple things like developing finger strength for tapping and working on muting techniques that are the things that guitarists will often skip when they learn this technique, and they'll be left wondering why their finger tapping sounds quite weak and sounds quite messy. But the good news is this exercise is going to help you develop finger strength, dexterity, and it's going to work on your muting technique. So let's get into learning how to play it, shall we? So this whole exercise is inspired by a course that I took on TrueFire by a guitarist called Tim Miller. This is no way sponsored by TrueFire, but I highly recommend that course if you're looking at using arpeggios creatively for the pentatonic shapes and all of the modes of the major scale. And the whole exercise is based around those 2-1, 2-1, 2-1 arpeggios, and it goes through 4 different sounds of the major scale modes. So starting at our Ionian, then a Dorian sound, Mixolydian, and then lastly a Lydian sound. So what do I mean by 2-1, 2-1, 2-1 arpeggios? Put simply, we're going to play 2 notes on one string and then 1 on the next. So going back to our G major, the Ionian sound, we're going to play 2 notes and then 1 on the next string, and repeat that process again 2 more times. But how can we play these cleanly? So let's take a look at some muting techniques. So for this one, I want you to use the underside of your index finger for all muting on this hand. And we're going to use a bit of our palm as well, included for this exercise. So as we go through the arpeggio, basically this is acting as a mute. So every time we tap an arpeggio, it's always laying across the string. In fact, if we go across the whole fretboard here without muting, you can hear we get a lot of string ring and stuff starting to bleed into each other. So this is what makes our tapping technique sound quite messy, versus there's always going to be a little bit of noise, but we're definitely muting and it's sounding a lot cleaner, in my opinion, this way. So now that you know that first initial shape and you know how to use some muting techniques, the next question is, well, what's the trick to making learning all of these shapes so easy? Well, it's basically going to be the choice of fingering. We're going to use the same fingering pretty much for every single shape. So in our initial shape, we're using the index finger to launch from the top of every single arpeggio, and you'll do the same for every other shape too. And you use a combination for most of the shapes of your index and your ring and your middle finger. So anything that's going to be 2 frets apart, we're going to use the index and our middle finger. Anything that's 2 frets apart, we're going to use our index and our ring finger. And for our other hand, this is really simple. We're going to follow the same pattern, and essentially we're going to have this. For every single string, your index finger will take care of the first one, your middle finger will take care of the second one, and your ring finger will take care of that last one. Even though we're moved to our next shape, we're still covering those same strings using this tapping hand. And here we're just going to think about the fingering. This is the only one that's slightly different. You're going to use your ring finger here your little finger here, because we're jumping a higher number of frets. And as you play each one of these shapes, I would ask that you also play the corresponding chord, just so you start to understand the sound of these chords along with the tapped arpeggio. I love that Dorian sound there. Moving on to our dominant chord, so the third chord in our progression. That's that Mixolydian sound, the dominant sound. And this one's really easy. It's basically a mirror image across the fretboard here. And you're just going to be playing your index and your ring finger, and then following that same for positioning for those fingers. And then lastly, that Lydian sound, that flat 5 sound or sharp 4. Sounds lovely. And again, same principle here. Play that chord and then let's tap the shape. And then we're back to the start of the cycle there. Tim Miller's 2-1-2-1-2-1 arpeggio approach is such an awesome way of playing arpeggios. This was the course where I was absolutely hooked from start to finish, and I highly recommend you go and check out that course on TrueFire too, after watching this video, of course, wink wink. Now you get into the grips with these 3 chord techniques. There's one last crucial lesson you cannot afford to skip. So in our last lesson of this technique segment, you'll take all of the techniques and you're going to tie them together by learning how to play them cleanly. See you on the other side. Have you ever wondered how your favorite math rock guitarists play such complicated riffs so cleanly? Yet, when you try to play such riffs, notes start to bleed into each other, there's unwanted string ring and other overtones, and the parts just start sounding all messy. Well, how do they play so cleanly? Well, besides tons of practice, let's say, it's often down to the concept of muting, a technique that is often overlooked or under-practiced by many guitarists. Yet, it is an incredibly important technique that you need to develop in order to take your guitar playing to the next level. So in today's video, I'll break down 3 ways that you can effectively mute to play various types of math rock guitar techniques. Also, you can start playing more cleanly. Have you ever heard tight strumming patterns such as these examples on screen and thought to yourself, I'd love to be able to play that tight? Well, to play like this comes down to 2 things: effective muting when we're playing chords, and the other is your control over chords itself. So when you're playing a strumming pattern, it's the release off the chord to make that kind of silence in between. And I'm just going to turn the reverb off just to demonstrate how tight this should sound. So let's practice both of these approaches by using a math rock-esque strumming pattern along with a chord progression. And the chord progression goes like this. We're going to be using shell voicings for chords. And the first approach is to effective muting when strumming. And to do this, we're going to be looking at 2 parts of the chord: above the chord and below the chord. Above the chord, depending on what fingers you're using, a lot of guitarists will use a part of the finger to touch the string above to mute it when strumming. For example, when we come to the second chord, I could be using the top of my middle finger here to mute the string there. Or I could even bring, as I've got here, I can bring a finger on top of the string to mute it as well. And then we need to mute below as well. And here we can use any part of our finger. In this case, I'm using the underside of my index finger, but when I move through chord shapes, this might change. But I've found in my experience, 90% of the time, it's going to probably be the underside of your index finger that's taking care of strings that are above the chord, if there are any. And what we're aiming for here is that we can play one note and we could hit all of the strings. And we'd only realistically hear that one note. And this is a great technique for adding a bit of, percussiveness, let's say, to your notes as well, while making it sound really clean. So we need to now combine this with the other approach, with our mastery over tension and release, let's say, pressure onto the chord and pressure off. So that's why I've come up with this math rock chord progression that's based on a delta sleep strumming pattern in 11/8 time, because it's got lots of lifts where we need to hit these rests that are in between the chord. So to do that, we're going to, one, make sure we're muting, and then whenever there's a rest, after we play the chord, we're going to hit the chord and pressure at the same time, and then release it straight afterwards. We want to make sure we get the correct note length for each of these strums. Let's practice this exercise all the way through to fully master the idea, and then we'll move on to the next one. Moving on, it's time to talk about those fast, precise, and often unconventional licks, riffs, and phrases often used by math rock guitarists. Again, like with effective muting when it comes to strumming, there are certain muting techniques that we can use to play riffs more cleanly. And to practice this, we're going to expand on our first chord exercise by including some little licks and twiddly bits between these chords, much like math rock guitarists will do with actual songwriting. So for each chord, we're going to cut them a little bit shorter, and we're going to round them off by putting a little phrase after each one. So for our first chord, we're going to play that much instead. And then we're going to pick this D minor arpeggio. And much like for muting techniques with strumming chords, the muting techniques here, we want to be muting anything that's above or below to get rid of any potential string ring, let's say, and make it sound more clean. So in this case, if we were picking this arpeggio here, we can use the top of our index finger here to mute that string there. In our case, we're actually palm muting, so we don't need to worry too much about that because we've already muted this low string with the palm on this hand with the fleshy part. And then again, anything that's above the chord, as we roll across with our fingers, it can all be taken care of with the underside of our index finger. The next chord, I've added a bit more of a stretch here to test you, but it's a very similar application with the palm muting. And you can see my index finger is leaning on those strings ever so lightly just to mute them there. But the trick to tying this all together before we move on to the next chord is that I've done this on purpose with strumming and playing these riffs, because I've noticed in my time giving guitar lessons that guitarists, when they move from strumming to picking in quick succession, let's say, they'll do things like this. Your picking hand will be still semi-floating, whereas realistically we want to get as much control over it as possible by having it rest on the bridge, and all of the picking work should be done from an anchor point here, and your wrist is going to be doing the picking, like so. Your arm shouldn't be moving up and down. Any part that we're picking, let's anchor it onto the bridge here to play that most precisely and cleanly. Trust me, it will really change the way you're playing if you haven't been doing so already. It'll allow you to play much more quickly and much more cleanly, like so. Moving on to our third chord. And I hear you say now, but what about when we pick the other way, when we go down instead of up? So I've included this cheeky little arpeggio here for a G minor, for a G dominant 7 sound. This one, we're going to be going the opposite way. And the last chord here, to play this cleanly, because you're going to release your muting, there's no extra sound, you can bring your little finger down here, ready to start the arpeggio. And again, anchoring your wrist on the guitar here, and then it's all going to be this up pick motion. And as you roll across the strings, you're going to be muting it more and more with your index finger. And then I put a little gap at the end just to get you prepared for give you a little break, let's say, before we get back to the start of the repeat. All right, let's practice this one. No video about math rock guitar techniques would be complete without talking about finger tapping. And in my experience, this is one of the most tricky techniques to play cleanly. But fret not, let's look at a few ways that we can start playing finger tapping more cleanly. And again, let's expand on the already established exercise by incorporating those strumming muting techniques. And we're now going to introduce those finger tapping muting techniques by adding a finger tapping riff in between these chords. It's worth noting I'm going to be tapping with a pick, so I'm going to be using my middle and my index finger on my strumming hand to perform any tapping that I will do there. Okay, so now we're getting familiar with the strumming muting. The tapping riff is going to go like this. It's still based around that, the arpeggio shapes that we've been doing, in this case the D minor arpeggio. And I'm basing it around an inversion for the tapping part up here, if you're wondering. But there's a little bit tricky now for our tapping, because we're hammering on from nowhere. Here, it's not the same as when we're already fretting the note and then we can effectively mute the string above and below. As you can hear, we're now hammering on from nowhere. So a few things that we can do, it all depends on the context, but in the context of our riff here, we can use because I'm going to bring in my hand up here for tapping, I can use the underside of my palm here to mute that low string. So when I'm hammering on from nowhere, all I'm taking care of now is making sure that I do my best to stop these strings ringing. But you're going to hear there, unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that. That extra overtone, if you hear it. You can get a fret wrap to help with that, but you just got to do your best, especially when you're tapping around these where there's these harmonics on the 5th, the 7th and 12th. Just be aware that you are going to get a lot more overtones when tapping around those frets. So you're going to tap on there. And on this hand, you'll be using your middle finger to tap the 12th. And the second part of this muting technique is to always be using your index finger or another finger, but I found 90% of the time, to be honest, it's going to be your index finger as a mute as you go across these tapping strings, as I go across the strings here. Pay attention to the index finger. When it's not tapping, it's muting those strings. So that's for our first shape with the next chord. So come to our next chord, and again we're going to keep that same kind of framework here. And again, going to be muting the lower string again with the palm of my hand here. And again, notice my index finger is completely muting as I go across. And then for our last chord, I thought I'd have some fun here. We're going to keep that same shape we did earlier for the G7. But instead, we're going to tap it ascending instead. And this one's great practice for muting. because there's so much shifting going on here. What I'm doing, if I break this down quickly for you, after I tap on the first 2 frets here from the G string, and when I release off here, I can be muting here with this finger, or I could use the palm of my hand here to stop this, getting that low E sound there. And then here again, hammering on from nowhere. So I'm trying to bring my palm across the frets here, so now I'm touching the A string to stop this one ringing when I hammer on from nowhere here with this finger. Otherwise, I know you might be able to hear that A string faintly. But if I bring my palm, if I go across with the arpeggio, I can start to mute it that way, and the same applies here when I get to those higher strings. Alright, so one last time, let's practice this exercise. Another milestone reached. Look at you go. Look how far you've come already. You're on your way to becoming a math rock guitar aficionado in no time. But yet, there's still more to this journey. And now you're ready to take the next step into another essential component of math rock, and that is learning alternate tunings. So in the following class, you'll enroll into a journey into mastering the basics of math rock and Midwest Emo's most popular tunings, and those are FACGCE and DAEAC#E. We'll get started with one of the most popular tunings, FACGCE, and in the video you're about to see, you're going to learn one of the best riffs, I believe, to get started with this tuning, and I go crazy about Telecasters. See you on the other side. Okay, so let's get into a brief riff tutorial. I'm going to help you through this one. First, you're going to need to grab a Telecaster. Just joking, a Telecaster is optional. However, I do recommend a Telecaster. If you haven't got a Telecaster, you might want to get a Telecaster. So a big part of math rock is using different tunings, and that's what we're going to do for this song. We're going to tune from standard tuning to FACGCE tuning, which is this F major 9 chord. So let's go through this together. I'll just throw my tuner on. So your E string is going to go up to F, so you're going to go up a semitone. Your A is going to stay the same, but make sure you retune that one. Your D string is now going to come down to C. The G string will stay the same, and then your B is going to go up to C, and then lastly your E string will stay the same. Make sure to retune. Just get lost in that for days, right? Now we have this wonderful melancholy kind of feeling to it, and these tunings just set you off into this feeling already. They kind of give you some colouring on a canvas, so to speak, that you can write from. So I'm going to have the tab on screen here to help you through this riff, but I want to divide it into 2 parts. We're going to have this pull off and hammer on phrase, and then we'll have this ascending melody, like a repeating phrase. So to begin with the first phrase, you're going to hit the C string open, and you want to keep that ringing. You want to make sure that you're not hitting it and muting it as we progress through this riff. I want you to use your ring finger on the 4th fret of the C string here, and you're going to pull off to the 2nd fret and then pull off to open. So hit that C string, and then after that you're going to hammer on from nowhere onto the 2nd fret on the G string. I'll do that slowly for you. And that's the first part of the phrase. It is much quicker than in the actual song, but we'll practice it slowly, we'll build up the speed, and by no time you'll have it down. to the full speed like that. After that, we've got the second phrase where we're going to ascend up. I want you to focus more on the picking pattern here, so this repeating picking pattern. And to make things easier, I just want you to do this ascending pattern using one finger, so you're not really thinking about this hand so much, and you can concentrate on the picking. So I do recommend the middle finger for this one. So when we hit this fret here, you might hear there's two slides in that section, and we're just going to use the one finger to do that as well. So we'll do the first phrase. Single note, slide, single note, slide. Once you're familiar with that, I want you to practice with it along with me really slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. That riff, well, that album in general has a huge impact on not just the way that I play, but my life in general. It's definitely one of those life-changing albums, and if you're anything like me, you'll want to learn everything you can about this beautiful tuning. So let's unlock this tuning a little bit more by learning some of the must-know chords that capitalize on the beautiful sound and feeling that we get from this tuning. Have fun strumming and get lost in the sound. See you after. Hey there, Steve here, hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Here we're all about helping each other get better at math rock and Midwest emo style guitar. So I've been busy this week behind the scenes working out all of these different movable chord shapes in the key of F major in the tuning of FACGCE tuning, just for you. And don't worry, I'm going to share all of those with you in this video. And by the way, if you're a lovely Patreon that's watching the channel, I've put together a lovely PDF that's got all of the chords that I'm going to show you in this video, as well as some bonus chord progressions there for you as a thanks, as a way of saying thanks for supporting this channel. So go ahead and check that down below in the description. So in this video, I'm going to show you 7 chords in the key of F major that are just perfect for that twinkly Midwest emo kind of sound. And I'm going to show you these starting from the 6th string root up here, the 5th string root, and the 4th string root as well. So you've got maximum coverage for the fretboard here. Then I'll show you a couple of ways that you can use these chords to get started creating some twinkly ideas of your own. Like I said, these chords are all built from the key of F major. If you're not familiar with the keys, don't worry, you can still use these chords and you can still benefit from all of the shapes that I am about to show you. So starting from our 6th string roots, that first chord I've shown you is the tonic chord, so the first chord in F major. And you can use that one there. On the tab, I've muted this string because they're going to be these movable kind of shapes. But completely fine to play it that way too. We then come to our F, so F G, our second, is going to be a G minor chord. And there's a reason here I've got my index over the top here on the 1st fret. It doesn't really sound like a G minor chord when we're like that. It's going to be some kind of inversion instead. So we'll have to do a little bit of finger gymnastics there. And the good news is for our next chord, the A minor, we're just going to take this position and we're going to slide up 2 frets and make use of those open strings for our A minor chord there. And then our next chord is going to be the B flat major, so the 4th degree. And it's kind of like that minor shape there. We're just going to slide this your little finger up 1 more fret. And now we've got the C major, the 5th. So that minor shape again for D minor. Now we've got the tricky one, which is going to be the diminished chord, so E diminished. So for this one, I'll just play it for you. The hard thing here is barring these 2 strings. It sounds like it needs to be resolved, right? So let's go to our our F major chord there. So those are all the chords starting from the 6th string. Let's move on to the 5th string. So here, now we're starting from A, so F, G, A. So we're going to be starting from the 3rd degree in F major. So that's an A minor chord. You can just play that open like that. You can already start to hear some ideas in that chord itself. Next, we've got this B flat major chord. Do like that one. Then our 5th degree is going to be a C7 here. Got that dominant sound in there, combined with these 2 open strings. Then we've got D minor. Now we're going to have our E diminished shape again. So all we need to do here is bring our index to the 6th fret on the high E string. So just to make that diminished chord. And now the F major 9. We're back to the tonic there. Do you like the sound of that one? And then after that, F, then we're going to have another G minor chord, which goes like this. So again, we need that note in there. Otherwise, it's not technically a minor sound. And then we're back to the A minor 7, an octave up. And lastly, from the 4th string root here, now we're in C. So there's your C chord. Now we're going to have a D minor, E diminished, and then our F major chord. There's the tonic, right? Then G minor, A minor, a B flat major, and then back to the C there. But it sounds like it needs to keep going right to resolve. So let's go through. C, D minor, E diminished. I can't get my fingers fit in it. Telecasters just don't want to do this. Listen to that intonation too. And then I really need to get this intonated. And then we're back to the tonic there on the F. All right, so here's a couple of ways that you can start using these chords to be creative and start creating some of those twinkly kind of riffs. Now you know a bunch of chords in many different parts of the fretboard. What we can do is start to create these super beautiful twinkly chords in the left and right of your headphones, let's say, if you're listening to this, or in your speakers. And you can do this with 2 different guitar parts. So for example, if we had that G minor chord here, you could have a guitar playing that in the lower register, and you could have one up here. And if you put them both together, it would sound something like this. Or another approach we could do is we could keep in with that similar idea. So for example, we could have this F major 9 chord. You could have someone droning that down here, and then you could have someone playing other chords, arpeggiating them to create some kind of outline for another harmony, another guitar part. And you hear this in action in American football, Never Meant. You have this droning C sound that Steve Holmes is playing, and then Mike Kinsella's part, the counterpart, it's in a slightly different tuning, but basically the bass in that, the outline, is outlining a different progression, that counterpoint to that melody. And again, here's how that sounds if you were to put both those ideas together. So I hope some of those movable chords and a couple of demonstrations of how you could apply them got your creative juices flowing, because in your last video on FACGCE, I want to show you an easy way you can start writing ideas in this beautiful tuning. And it all revolves around you understanding just one scale to unlock the entire fretboard in this tuning. Have you ever watched a video and or heard a song in FACGCE, been inspired by it, gone and grabbed your guitar, tuned your guitar up to FACGCE, strummed it open and thought, wow, this sounds wonderful, and then suddenly have the crushing realization, I don't even know how to start playing in this tuning. So in this video, I'll show you a straightforward method you can use to write those twiddly twinkly riffs in FACGCE tuning. And furthermore, show you how some of the best math rock guitarists in the game are using this tuning to create some of the coolest ideas. And at the end of the video, I'll give you a framework that you can use to start practice crafting such ideas in this tuning. But first, well, it's down to how the guitar is tuned. FACGCE tuning is tuned to an open chord, that chord being an F major 9. And the hint of sadness we get from this chord is created by two clashing notes, the F and the E. And we actually have this interval, which sounds rather nasty, but because it's spaced out so far over a few octaves, it doesn't clash as much, and that's what gives us that feeling of that kind of like tint of sadness to this tuning. And this means that we start our song ideas, any idea that we write, from this sound. And as Yvette Young refers to it, she refers to it as having some coloring on a canvas already.
Also, I view it as like a way to color the canvas a bit. So it's like, instead of starting with a white canvas, you start with like, it sounds really nice just by itself, and it takes you somewhere. And I hear like all kinds of melodies over it.
Right, so now we know why this tuning makes us feel like we're reliving a past teenage breakup. Let's get into how we can start writing twiddly twinkly ideas to express the pain of that breakup. What if I asked you to relearn all of the chords, arpeggios, scales that you currently had learned on guitar? I'm sure you would say something like, are you kidding? That's way too much effort. I'm never going to do that again. Well, this is the feeling you're getting when you're tuning to FACGCE, because all of that knowledge is kind of gone, and it's kind of like we're relearning guitar again in some regards. Fret not though, I am here to tell you that we do not need to learn all of those pesky scales, chords, arpeggios, and so on. And I will show you how we're going to get around this problem. The trick lies in the tuning itself. Because we're tuned to an F major chord and we want to capitalize on the sound of that tuning, 99% of the songs that I listen to do just this, meaning that they will usually just use one scale for their twiddling around, which means we can do the same. Hurrah! Well, what scale do you think that is? If you said F major, then you would be wrong. And I know it seems obvious because we're tuned to an F major chord, so wouldn't we use F major? Well, when we actually look at the songs that, well, I'm aware of that are in this tuning, 99% of them are using the C major scale for all of that twiddling, meaning they're treating this F major 9 sound, if they do use it, or the F major sound, as the 4th chord in C major, because they're using a B natural instead of that B flat in all of the twiddly riffs that they're using. And if you don't know your music theory, it's completely fine. It's not necessary to know to put all of this into action. To clarify, here's all the notes of C major across the fretboard from, open to the octave on the 12th fret in this tuning. And here's the notes of one of the most famous riffs in FACGCE, Never Meant by American Football, superimposed over that scale. And notice it uses all of the notes from the C major scale. Notice how it's just using notes from that C major scale and that it's launching from the C note itself. The whole riff is based around that. Furthermore, here's another example. So this song is called Hot Probs by a band called Colossal. And again, I've superimposed the notes, and as we can see, they're just using all of the notes from the C major scale. And again, notice how that makes use of all of those notes from the C major scale and how it's launching all of the ideas based on a lower kind of harmony note. That's not to say that every riff does this, of course. There are some outliers here. And one song I can think of is the introduction to the song Bronco by Yvette Young of Covet. And this song, again, is an FACGCE, of course. And in this riff, she's in C major, but she does switch to the F major scale. So listen at the end of this riff and you'll hear that in action. So that B flat just suddenly comes out of nowhere, and it's that lovely chromatic run that she puts in her riffs, and it sounds wonderful, it sounds spicy. But again, like the other two examples we just looked at, notice how all of the riffs are launched from some kind of harmony below. So this tells us two things. First, it means that we can use the C major scale to do all of that twiddling around our ideas. And second, it means that we can use a lower harmony note to launch our ideas and then fill in the gaps between them, let's say, by using that scale along with the open strings. This means instead of having to learn all of the scales, arpeggios, chords again, we can just focus on using this scale. I'm not expecting you to memorize it, of course. I just want you to refer to it as you are crafting ideas. And your ear will probably do the rest of the work anyway by choosing the right notes as you go along. So to demonstrate this two-step process in action, I'm going to choose some lower notes on the F string here, and I'm going to stick to a particular part of the fretboard for each of my notes and try and craft some riff ideas around that. So I've decided to go with this 7th fret, 9th fret, and 12th fret. And I can see if I take a look at the chart here, if I was to stick within between the 7th and 9th fret here, I can kind of use those notes to whittle around on, and of course I can use the open strings too. And you can start to get some ideas going like that already. I'm kind of digging that sound already. My ears are pulled towards this. I'm going to pull off.
1 hour later.
So I'm starting to craft some idea here. I like that pull up. Then I'm going to keep a similar motive going here. I want to keep some kind of repetition. And it's worth noting that as we do move around with different harmony notes, we're still playing the same scale, but we're going to change between like kind of minor and major kind of sounds. That's not important, but I just wanted you to know that. But we can still use the same scale and we can still get the same, result from it. I'm going to try and round the riff off here. And then in my head I can hear this like kind of a descending kind of lick to get back to the introduction here, and I can sort my chart and I can see where the notes are on this higher string here. I'm hearing something like that in my head. Something like that. So let's try and put it together. Anyway, I would obviously spend a bit more time and hash that idea out, but it's got off to a great start there, and it's all just looking at a lower harmony note, looking at using my ear mostly to guide me with what sounds I'm hearing in my head, and of course consulting the major scale chart that I've given you here just to find what notes you can use, and obviously capitalizing on the sound of the tuning itself by including the open strings for more of those twiddly, widdly ideas there. So I want to leave you with some root note ideas that you can practice filling in the gaps to. So we're going to have an open string, 2nd fret, 4th fret, and a 7th fret. And this would give an outline of a 4, 5, 6, and 1 progression. So, a lot to unpack there, I know, but I hope the writing demonstrated I provided at the end gave some guidance on how you could get started yourself. In fact, I recommend using the approach I demonstrated with the chords you learned in the previous video as an excellent place for you to start experimenting from. But now you have an idea of the potentials of writing in FACGCE, I want to show you another beautiful, commonly used tuning that's more used in Midwest emo and emo-tinged math rock, and that is DAEAC E tuning. I know, another tuning. Are you mad? But you can take and apply the same framework we just used for FACGCE and apply it to this new tuning. And I've got the videos to just help you do that. So first, here's a video that will give you an overview of DAEAC E tuning. This is DAEAC E tuning. And it feels like no matter where you place your fingers on the fretboard, there's this beautiful chord just waiting to be found. So much so, it feels like cheating when playing guitar. And by the end of this video, you'll learn a whole bunch of easy shapes that sound wonderful in this tuning. The biggest reason for this tuning being so easy to play in is the repetition of these A and E tuned strings. So for A and E, which means chord shapes become incredibly easy in this tuning, and we end up with this whole bunch of movable chord shapes. I just love the sound of this tuning, and it's just so easy to write in, like I said, so much so that one of the easiest songs that I've ever written that I've been happy with was in this tuning. And with this song, I wasn't even thinking about what key I'm in, what scales I'm using, what chords I'm using. I simply found a space and I let my ears guide me. So to give you some insight into that and to show you how you could possibly do something similar, I started with this shape in mind. When I heard this sound, I was like, okay, I've got something there. And I found that I could just even just move the bass note like that to come up with ideas. And because I like to play like more of a math rock kind of emo, kind of widdly kind of style, I found I could put you know, some melody stuff in between these chords, and it was really easy to just use my ear and even find what those melody notes were. It didn't take me that too much time at all. And then I moved that chord shape down here, and I thought, well, that gives a nice break in between there. And I thought it also sets up like kind of a pre-chorus. And again, because of these double strings, it was just so easy to find those melody notes to take it where I wanted to. And then I had this another section to the song. It was this chorus kind of section, and I had, you know, this D kind of sound in mind. Found this chord, it sounds very grand, very regal sounding to me. And then I thought, again, went with some kind of moving bass line that way. Again, I wasn't even really paying attention to what chord shape it was. And again, we get these movable shapes. And I even use that same chord progression for the outro of the song. And again, I just had that kind of tapping part. Sorry if I just sent you down a tiny moving parts rabbit hole, but you'll find a lot of awesome ideas written by Dylan Matheisen of Tiny Moving Parts, and it just sounds very pretty and sparkly. But before you get to writing ideas in this tuning, just like we did with FACGCE, let's learn some movable chord shapes to get you started. So DAEAC E tuning has got to be one of my all-time favourite alternate tunings, and it's used a ton by Midwest emo bands and math rock bands. And even though we need to tune up some strings and tune down this E down to D, it's highly worth it for some of the beautiful chords that we can make in this tuning. So this tuning is an A major with a D in the bass. It sounds wonderful when you put the two together like that. So I want to teach you some chords, like I just shown you in the intro there, that just capitalize on the sound of those open strings. And I'm going to keep it fairly easy for you so you can take these chords away and just start writing with them today. Interrupting editing Steve here. So for this section here where I'm going through these chords, you've got to keep in mind that because of this open tune sound, we've got this A, C sharp and E, which is this A major triad going on. So we kind of, every chord that I'm going to play here is kind of like a polychord, meaning there's two chords going on at the same time. So you have this A major with like different variations of a root note going on. But I'm seeing the application as if we were playing like this is, the 5 chord in A major. Just keep that in mind, and all of the chord shapes that you're about to see here, I haven't given all the chord names because they are quite strange, and again because of that poly, two chords going on at the same time. So just keep that in mind as you watch this section. Anyway, back to the video. Now basically we're going to go through the key of A major, and I'm going to give you a chord for each scale degree of A major. And we're going to start at the top here. As we know, we've got that D in the bass, so we've got this like kind of 4 chord sound. And all you're going to do is put your index finger on the fretboard here, like so, to get that emotionally invoking chord there. Love that one. Next one is basically those octave shapes, and it's going to be here on the 2nd fret there. Now we've got our 5 chord in A major, kind of sound, let's say. Now we're going to have the 6th chord. So what we're going to do is slide up. Now we're going to have our 7th chord, so kind of a diminished sound. Love the tension in that one, right? And now to our 1, the A. Sounds lovely, resolved right, that one. Now our 2nd minor chord, 3rd minor chord. So again, just sliding up. And then we arrive back at the 4th chord, up there. And let's go through those chords. I'll use that same progression that I shown you in the intro. So something that you can practice and start using straight away with these chords. I love throwing in that borrowed chord. It really just catches your listener's ear, right? Lovely. So don't be scared. Feel free to mess around with those chords. I really want you to use these to start just inspiring you to, create some kind of song ideas. So for those of you who want to start creating some melody with these chords, I know that's a big thing that we do in math rock and Midwest emo. I just want to teach you, like these chords, the same kind of application, some simple arpeggios that you can use with each shape, with each of these chords, and they're kind of this repeating shapes across the fretboard. And when we put them together, we can use this pattern that will go across from each of the chord shapes, and they just all link together and sound nice, basically. So I'm going to start up here on the 12th fret for this D sound. And the arpeggio is going to be which for Final Fantasy fans, it's the first 3 notes of Air Riff's theme tune there, I think. So all these notes are basically the 1st, 3rd and 5th of these chords. So they're going to sound nice accompanied with these chord shapes. Now for our next chord, the minor chord, so again here. And another minor chord, same shape. So just that repeated shape. And to a major chord again, so like the D. Now we've got the diminished, half diminished kind of chord, so it's the only one out of the lot that's slightly different. It's kind of that triangle instead of this triangle. You could see it that way. And then we come up to our other minor chord here, the 6th. So we're going to that triangle there. Now our major chord. Now we're back at the start. So and then obviously that one an octave higher there. And you can start to connect these together with some kind of ideas. So you can slide up to notes between these 2 shapes, you know. And so we can start to connect some ideas. So here's an example of that. And don't forget you can make use of the open strings too.
I hope those chords and those arpeggios are demonstrated at the end have got some ideas floating around in your head. And for the last video in this lesson, just as you learned with FACGCE, there is a scale that unifies this whole tuning together, and you can use it as an easy way to start writing. Enjoy, and see you after. So in this video, I'm going to show you a simple way you can use this tuning to create some epic song ideas. But first, let's hear why this tuning sounds good and how you can tune your guitar to this tuning. So I want to ask you, why do you think this tuning puts you in a certain feeling? So much so that even minor chords like this one have a different feel to them compared to standard tuning. Well, this is largely due to the 12-string kind of effects that you get with a doubling of tuned strings. So we have these double A tuned strings and double E. And this gives us to be specific, an A major chord with a D in the bass, so we're situated in a major kind of sound. So this means when we use this tuning, we're working from a sound already. We've got some direction to the song, let's say. Compared to when we think about standard tuning, where it's more like a blank canvas, where it's largely up to the player to choose the direction and the feel of the song. This tuning is largely used by Midwest emo bands, but it's also found in a few like poppy math rock style songs as well. And it catches your ear because of the distinct sound of this tuning. The next thing to address is, yes, you will have to tune some of the strings up for this tuning, but don't worry, as long as you've put the strings on correctly, it's very unlikely that you're going to snap any of them. For now, I recommend using the guitar that you've got to try out this tuning. However, if you do find you really enjoy it and you want to keep your guitar in this tuning for the long run, or maybe you've got a spare guitar you can do this with, then you might want to compensate the string gauges for dropping that low E down to D and tuning these higher 3 strings up. A shameless plug, I've got a more detailed guide about the different string gauges that you can use in my Math Rock Essentials ebook, as well as a lot of other stuff about these tunings. There's a link for that down below in the description. Ultimately though, if you are worried about snapping strings, then an alternative is to throw a thicker gauge of strings on there, maybe go up from 1 gauge from what you usually use, then tune down to C, G, D, G, B, D, which is the same tuning, but a step lower. Had to really think about that one there. Well, how do we write in this tuning without having to do what feels like the daunting task of relearning the guitar? It's actually pretty straightforward. In fact, I'm going to show you a few examples of songs using this tuning. And here's an A major scale superimposed across the entire fretboard. While listening to these examples, I want you to see if you notice any patterns forming.
Hopefully you noticed that all three examples there were using notes from this A major scale to create ideas. In fact, the entirety of those songs just stick to using this A major scale. And this explains why songs sound quite similar in this tuning. This isn't a bad thing, of course. In fact, it's what makes DAEAC C#E tuned songs have a unique sound to them. If you wanted a different feel to your music, then you could perhaps tune to a different tuning, or you could just stick in standard tuning. Putting this aside though, this means that we can use this A major scale as a song generation tool to create some awesome ideas. So am I asking you to memorize this entire scale across every part of the fretboard? No, of course not. But I am asking you to use this chart as a guide to consult it as you write ideas. And this is going to be, like I said, a system for generating ideas. And if you were to combine this with some of the most common approaches to the ways that guitarists generate song ideas, from inspiration, from using your own life experiences, collaboration with other musicians, to exploring new techniques, or even using music theory approaches, could all work for crafting song ideas. However, if you are new to the tuning, I recommend the following easier approach, and that is improvisation. And what I mean by this is just sitting there, looking at that chart and letting your fingers wander around and just finding ideas with not really paying too much attention. And don't forget to use those open strings, the doubling of these notes. Makes the job easier of learning it as well. And you'll start to learn these little cluster of notes, and hopefully hidden in there is a little spark for a new song idea. And in my experience, this approach will help you become more familiar with where all these notes are in a much more fun and productive way. But there is a hack that you can apply that pretty much guarantees that you will be coming up with ideas every time. Going back to one of our earlier examples, there's something else that we can learn when looking at this example, and I wonder if you can spot that. Hopefully what you noticed there was the ideas were being launched from these lower notes, a kind of harmony, so to speak, in that tiny moving parts example. We had this kind of chord progression going on. So it's like they are playing the chord progression and the lead part at the same time. And now you're aware of this, you will notice it happening in a ton of other songs that use alternative tunings, especially in like math rock and math rock adjacent music. And I want you to combine this with your noodling around on the fretboard to find ideas, but also thinking about the harmony as well. You don't always have to be playing the harmony, of course, but if you are aware of it, you could work out where you are on the fretboard in relation to what your bass player is playing, for example, or if you were creating the extra accompanying instruments. So for example, if I went back to that idea that I was playing in the intro, if that was my chord progression, I know I have these lower harmony notes. And I can look at this note here and I can whittle around on the fretboard to think of ideas. And here's something that I was working with earlier. Like I said, it didn't come up out that way straight away. And your ideas can be as simple as complex as you like. It's just the feeling that you're going with your song. I could keep those notes ringing, right? Alright, congratulations, you have graduated Math Rock Alternative Tuning class. And I say you're ready to move on to the last lesson in this Math Rock Essentials course. By the way, if you'd like guided tuition on mastering FACGCE tuning, then be sure to check out my Ultimate Guitarist Guide to FACGCE tuning. This is what I wish I had when I was learning FACGCE, because it would have saved me tons of time and confusion with how to best learn this beautiful tuning. check the link in the description to learn more about that one. So moving on, in the last lesson of this course, you will go beyond the basics, moving into concepts that will help you take everything that you've learned so far and give you the tools you can use to tie everything together, and it means you'll be able to start confidently writing your own math rock and Midwest emo style ideas and songs. To begin with, I want to talk about how to come up with an initial idea for writing a song from, and more importantly, talk about why you should be learning riffs, ideas, chords, chord progressions from your favorite math rock and math rock adjacent artists if you want to develop your own unique math rock style playing and writing on your guitar. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had the frustrating experience of sitting down to write something only to find that no matter how hard you try, nothing comes out? Well, I've had this problem for quite some time now, almost a year I would say. But in the past I've written plenty of songs I've been happy with. So why did I have this kind of mental songwriting block that prevented me from writing anything at all? It got to the point where I was doubting myself, would I ever be able to write anything that I was happy with again? Well, to answer this question led me on a journey into how other creative people create. I'm hoping basically I'll find some answers there. And I read a few books by other creators, like this one here by Andrew Huang, which is Make Your Own Rules. And I've also got Rick Rubin's latest book as well, In the Other Room. Well, these books were excellent, but it was this short book by Austin Kleon here, which is Steal Like an Artist, that I was quite reluctant to read with a title like this, but this basically solved that mental block for me. And there's a page in this book that basically summarizes the premise of this book and what really spoke to me. And it says, if we're free from the burden of trying to be completely original, we can stop trying to make something out of nothing, and we can embrace influence instead of running away from it. But I want to be clear here, I'm not talking about stealing from other artists and passing off something as your own. I stole lyrics in one of my first bands as a teenager, and it still makes me feel sick and annoyed with myself because it's one of my favorite bands and I really don't want to repeat that mistake again. So don't be like teenage me, and instead what I'm talking about here is learning from our favorite artists and reverse engineering what they're doing and applying the many different influences from all these artists and we love and transform those ideas into something unique to us. So in the spirit of transformation, I want to show you a few ways of how bands, songs and ideas I've learned during my guitar journey influence the way that I write ideas, and how this can help you take your influences and amplify and transform them into something unique to yourself on your own guitar. When writing, I tend to either start with harmony or a particular riff, but in either case I would be influenced by artists without me really knowing it. And it's only by reverse engineering an idea that I can usually work out the influence and all of the tiny moving parts behind it. So I've taken an idea I wrote recently and reverse engineered it to see really where these ideas came from. And for this idea, it all started with an inspiration from a chord progression. So I believe the original idea was inspiration from all of the math pop bands in the UK that I love, bands like Colour and Tube Lord, for example. They play these kind of like poppy chord progressions in a staccato kind of way. But naturally, I extend chord shapes in my playing, and it's more like chords you hear in bands like Delta Sleep and Chon. Which to me just sound a bit more jazzier and a bit more what I like to use. But where did I go from there? Well, one of the first and easiest places I usually jump to is messing with the rhythm of an idea through strumming and picking patterns and even looking at the timing. During this process, sometimes something would just come to me and it will feel like it's original, but when I really think about it, obviously it's influenced by something I've learned or heard before in the past. Well, with my idea, I ended up on a strumming pattern. When I really think about it, it comes from my obsession with a song called Godsend Conspirator by Coheed and Cambria. But what could I do next? I could leave that idea as it is. It sounds great, right? Or I could use it to evolve a song or add another section or even mess with the idea itself, and that's exactly what I ended up doing here. And typically I feel like I can always add chords to progression and to introduce some kind of variation to the idea. And my recent learning focus that I've been looking at now is all influenced this idea, because I've been on a desire to learn more about chords and spicy chords that really aren't in the key, and the awesome possibilities also of using chord inversions. So a band that uses chords that are outside of the key in a really inspiring and interesting way to me is a band called Delta Sleep. And in a song called The Younger Years from their Younger Years EP, they use a lot of this unexpected borrowed chords, we say, the chord that's taken from a different key. In this case, they play this C sharp minor 9, followed by a C major 9 chord like that. And unknowingly, I was influenced by this by adding this borrowed chord to our progression. This E flat major 9 chord is borrowed from the other key. So if you'd like to learn more about this borrowed chord concept and commonly used chords in math rock itself, we'll have a whole section about those chords and chord progressions in my Math Rock Essentials ebook. So check out the description in the link for that. A shameless plug for you there, but I really do believe that will help you. But wait, now I had a chord progression, a rhythm, and some variation to keep the idea interesting, I found myself wanting to evolve this idea and add another section to the song. And I found myself, as I was playing this, hearing some kind of melody over the top of the chord progression, and it ended up sounding something like this. And before I knew it, I was starting to play the chords along with this melody, much like Mario and Eric of Chon do in some of their songs. They play a chord and add this melody around it. And I had to change this chord here. It's still that G major kind of sound there. So by blending this approach with my established chord progression, I ended up with my final idea for the chorus. Since making that video, I've also read and recommend this book as well, which is Show Your Work, by Austin Kleon, which gives you 10 ways to share your creativity and get discovered. But you need some work to share, right? So now you have a better idea of how influence plays a huge part in the way you are going to write. Or maybe it was just a good reminder for you. But while I believe this to be an important step, there are concepts specific to math rock that will assist you in writing math rock style ideas on your guitar. So in this next video, I'll teach you 3 ways you can make your ideas more mathy in nature, let's say. In this video, I'm going to teach you 3 things that you can do to take a simple riff idea like this and help you make it into something more math rock like this. For this one, we're going to be in standard tuning, but all of the ideas apply to any tuning that you may wish to use. I also aim to show you how math rock melodies differ from more conventional style riffs and melodies that you may be familiar with. So, step 1, introduce dissonance and make your ideas more angular sounding. Typically, math rock riffs tend to contain more dissonance, so they sound a bit less familiar than more conventional styles of riff writing. For example, the following melody is quite pleasing, it's smooth and it's easy to listen to. And if we were to introduce some kind of dissonance to this melody, it would already start to sound more like a math rock style riff. And And all I've done in this melody is change 2 of the notes. In addition, because I've changed these 2 notes, now the riff has become more angular sounding. It sounds more spiky. If we take a look at the original riff melody idea, we can see that the idea flows smoothly in an arch-like fashion. There's no big jumps between the notes. The intervals are very small, and the notes that have been used are quite safe notes. They are something we call chord tones. So they are mostly roots, thirds, and fifths. In contrast to this, in the changed melody, there are bigger distances. We say the interval is bigger, so there's bigger jumps in some of the notes, making this melody more angular, giving it more of a spiky feeling. Some intervals that you can use to achieve this are the minor second interval, the major second interval, the flat fifth interval, minor seventh interval, and the major seventh interval. So experiment with these within your ideas to make your riffs sound more angular, and just adjust to personal taste. The second step is to think of the phrasing of your riff idea. Now we have some kind of melody outline for our riff idea. The next step in our math rock riff creating journey is to think about the phrasing of this idea to make it sound more riff-like and less melody-like. The original idea is phrased in this very straight 8th note idea basically, and if we add a simple drum beat and we can accent beats 2 and 4, we can hear how this is like quite a common melody idea that you'll hear in conventional styles of music. To contrast this with our math rock riff, we need to move these accents off the strong beats and move them into more unfamiliar territory. So we can do this by rearranging the phrasing, so how we play the idea and which notes we accent. So we can use something called syncopation. And this means our stronger beats are now occurring in more irregular places. They've been shifted off the beat. By phrasing this idea ever so slightly differently from the original idea, we can shift the accents and we can come up with a more mathier style riff like this. So experiment with the phrasing and experiment with where you're accenting the strong beats in your ideas. One way you can build up your phrasing vocabulary and looking at where you can place the accent in different places is to, expose yourself to math rock music, pay attention to what's been accented, and also by learning those riffs as well, you'll pick up various phrasings that will start to work its way into your own playing. The last step of this video is bring it all together, and to do this we are going to use odd time signatures. A commonly known feature of math rock is the use of shifting time signatures and the use of odd time signatures. So by odd time signatures, we mean signatures that are not divisible by 2 and 3. So things such as 5/4, 7/8, what are we going to go with, 13/8 for example. Any kind of multiple that sounds and feels odd. However, that being said, there is a wealth of math rock that is in conventional time signatures, common time, like 4/4. However, the way they subdivide the beat, where they put the accents, makes it feel as if it's in odd time. So if you're interested in learning more about subdividing time signatures, you can check out this video. To wrap up our idea, I'm going to extend this bar to a bar of 5/4. So we're adding another quarter note to the bar, and to wrap it up nicely, I added these. I've added 2 8th notes to bring it back round to the start of the phrase again. It wraps it up nicely, and listen how this 5/4 feeling definitely gets us within that math rock riff territory. So hopefully that video gave you some motivation to take an existing idea you have already written and experiment with making it more angular and messing with the phrasing and introducing some odd time. But I found in my experience that the odd time part of the equation can be quite tricky to get your head around. So I have one last video that will break down a neat little trick that will make any idea that you have write and feel odd even if it's in 4/4 time. It's quite an old video, but I encourage you to stick with it because it'll transform the way that you look at writing math rock style ideas.
Hey there, Steve here. Hope you're doing well. It's lovely to see you again if you're back. Today I want to talk about compound meter and why should you care about compound meter and what can you use it for. So first off, I just want to say that this is different from compound time signatures. What is meant by that is things like 6/4, 6/8, 9/4, 9/8 and so on, where the beats can be subdivided into groups of threes, but don't worry about any of that. We're not going to be looking at that in this lesson. What I want to talk about here is where we take traditional note groupings and then we're going to make them unorthodox to create some kind of really cool different kinds of rhythms. So best way to learn, I always think, is by giving some examples and by practicing. So that's what we'll do now. So for example, a traditional grouping, let's take the time signature of 4/4. There are 4 main beats in the meter of 4/4, right? And you could subdivide this into 8th notes. So you'd have this kind of grouping, which you could count as 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and that equals up to 8 notes, right? So what I mean by compound time signatures is where we're taking smaller time signatures and then we're cramming them into this 4/4 bar, but the note groupings are unorthodox. They're not even, if you get me, where the placement are. So for example, if we had a grouping of 3 2 and 3, that would be like this: 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. So there you get this already disjointed rhythm, right? From 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, and you can do all kinds of things like 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2. As long as the math adds up to 8, right? You can do as many different groupings as you want, as long as they're kind of unorthodox. And again, why should you care about this? We can create some kind of really cool rhythms, which is a great tool to use for math rock. So I want to show you a few examples. So I'm just going to grab my guitar. Right, so back with my guitar, and I'm going to use 3 chords. And if you want to practice as well, you can use these same 3 chords. So it's a G major 7, A minor 11, C major 9. Why? Because they sound nice together. I'm going to use these compound meters that I've been talking about. I'm going to use just 4/4, and I'm going to show you a bunch of different rhythms, and you feel free to practice along too if you want to grab your guitar. So I've just brought the click back in on this Nooks Mighty Light I got. It's a very useful practice tool for sure. So again, we're just going to be 4/4, and the first one I'm going to do is 1 5 2. So what I mean by this is like this: 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 1 1 2 3 4 5 1 2, and that's fitting in the bar of 5 5, but it's sounding 5 5 4 4. Sorry, but it's sounding quite disjointed, right? And we could do, let's do 2 3 3. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. Again, it's in 4/4, but the rhythms are jumping around again quite nicely. 1 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 1 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 1 1 2 1 2 3 4 5. That sounds cool too. And we could do another one I made was 3 2 3. 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. And as good as you practice, whilst you're practicing these, not try to count them at first, but then start to actually feel the rhythm as you're playing it. So that was a 3 2 3 one again. And then how about 1 3 and 4? 1 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. And a cool thing you can do is, instead of having the 3 multiplications, is to have just 2. 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 just all in 4/4, right? But it's sounding, getting some really cool rhythms, and it's sounding quite like it's in our time, right? And with that idea of doing 3 chords over 2 changes there will really, can make a really cool progression with that. So what I've put together is some examples for you, because I think that'd be a bit more interesting than watching me just play guitar here right now. So what I've come up with is how this could be used in practice. So if, for example, if you just had a guitar part that was playing in 4/4, so I had this tapping part, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you were to put these additions behind it with the different chord changes, it's going to sound quite funky. So what I've done is exactly that. You'll hear this tapping sequence, and I've done the drums with it's going to have a straight 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the snare and the kick is going to accent where the guitar chords are changing. So let's take a listen to that one now. Yeah, so I think that sounds pretty cool, right? If you could really work something into a song with that. And also, if you want to practice any of that, then feel free to do. I encourage you to, because you're going to come up with some cool ideas. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, instead of playing the chord changes on each beat, instead picking it through a pattern instead. So like, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, for example. I've done the same thing again. So please enjoy this example, and that's what I'll leave you with for this video. I'll have the tab up on screen as well, but I'll also put it on my website, so if you want to jump over there and pick it up. And I really encourage you to start messing around with this. Not only do you need to do this, you can do this in 4/4, you can do this in any single time signature, if you get me. So you can do it in 5/8, 7/8, 5/4, 7/4, just everything, as long as obviously the beats add up to the initial bar, then you're going to be safe with that. So let me know how you get on with this. If it was over your head, please let me know. I like to know, so I can simplify it approach it in a different manner next time that I do this kind of thing. But I really appreciate everyone watching these videos and the support that you've been giving me. It's really keeping me going, and it's motivating to me to keep trucking on, basically. So as always, thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you next time. Please leave any comments below, and I'll try and get back to you and do my best to help you. Goodbye. Counting time? No wonder why they call it math rock. Terrible jokes aside, I hope that video gets you experimenting with your chords and your strumming, as well as arpeggiating, as well as how you could take an idea in the chord and subdivide it into different
picking patterns to produce those odd feelings. The potentials of this just go on and on. So hopefully by now you have an idea that you have written, and this leads to the next big problem you will face. Well, how do I take this initial song idea and transform it into an entire song? Well, luckily for you, in our last video, I'll teach you a system that takes one idea and how you can turn that into a full math rock style song. And if you're still here, you must be a very dedicated student, so thank you. And by the way, if you'd like to go deeper into the math rock style songwriting concept, then be sure to check out my Ultimate Math Rock Songwriting Blueprint course. There's a link for that down below in the description too. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has helped you get over that initial confusing learning hump when it comes to math rock guitar. And please enjoy this last video. Goodbye. Over the past 6 weeks, I've been on this deep dive into the way that math rock guitarists and math rock adjacent, well, I'm not going to lie, it was a lot of Midwest emo guitarists. I can't help myself. I just love the style so much. Well, how they write songs. I did all this for my new math rock songwriting system workshop, and today I'm going to share some of the secrets that I learned during that deep dive, and I'm going to show you how you can take just one idea and take that idea and make it into a full song. So the first step in this system is idea generation, and this is the perfect time to take the idea that you always whittle around with, that you've always dreamed of turning into a full song, but you've never bothered doing it. I laugh because I have plenty of ideas like this, and I want you to take that idea and you can use it for the rest of this system. But if you don't, this is completely fine. I'm pretty sure there's a few viewers here that have got different ways that they come up with ideas, and if you could share those below, that's really going to help out. However, here's a quick method that you can use now to come up with an idea that you can use for the rest of this system. So I'd like you to take this chord progression, an E major 9, a C sharp minor 9, and then a B major 9. And I want you to do one of two things here. I either want you to strum this chord progression in an odd way, or I would like you to go through the same chord progression but pick it using an odd kind of math rock style of pattern. And to do this, I want you to take inspiration from guitarists that you like and songs that you like. That way you're likely to start developing something that you are happy with, and it's more in the style that you are happy with playing on the guitar. In our case, of course, we're going to be doing some kind of a math rock kind of style here. So for example, with the chord progression, recently there's this song Bronco by Covert that I've listened to a million times, and there's a section in that song that has this kind of like really odd kind of strumming pattern, and I'm going to apply that theme here to these three chords. And if we're to take the opposite approach and look at picking patterns, for me, a lot of influence for picking patterns comes from Japanese math rock, or when I think about the Taiwanese band Elephant Gym as well. They have these kind of like really funky rhythmic picking patterns. So now, if you do have an idea, it's very likely that this idea is a good idea, and it's an idea that you are happy with, and it's in the style that you are looking for, and is setting up the direction for your song. But there's a good probability that your idea sounds too repetitive, and in math rock, this is often something we want to avoid. So let's fix that. Adding variation to my ideas is a lesson I've learned over and over again the painful way in my songwriting journey. When I write songs for my band Mountains, I would often write parts, and I could write a full song where all of the parts complemented each other and have this overall kind of shell, an overall song that I would then take to band practice and be like, check out my new idea to the band. And they would be like, yeah, I like the idea, but I could tell something was wrong. And a lot of the time it was just like, this idea is just, it feels stale after playing it, you know, a couple of times. So I'd always be very defensive of my own ideas, you know, this is my baby, how dare you, you know, we're not changing anything. But after a bit of back and forth between us and the band, largely it was always Ali, the bass player, who wanted to, recommending like, how about if we extend that idea, or if we play it at halftime, or how about we add some stops here and add some silence and pauses just for, you know, some variation, and just to make the idea, basically, it was never explicitly stated, but that was the purpose, just to make it more interesting. So to spare you those experiences, I do ask from now on that you try to experiment with adding variation to your ideas. There are tons of ways we can add variation to our ideas to make them feel less repetitive, and more importantly, be more like that math rock style. And one of the most simplest ways we can do this is just to vary the technique we use to play something. So if we take our Covert strumming example from earlier, was just begging for having something in between those strumming parts where I'm playing the dead notes. And that's where we could apply a picking pattern to vary the idea. So now, and that starts to vary the idea, it starts to evolve the idea. Another way to add variation would be to simply just change some of the notes in the chord as well. You could do it like that, and down here too. And then we can apply that same picking pattern with these changes. And if we want to take that to another step, we can even start introducing inversions of these chords as well. So we could have, instead of this chord, we could have this chord. Instead of this chord, we could have this chord. And instead of this chord, we could have... And then you can imagine this kind of application being applied here. So it's like an evolving idea with variation. Let's say that cycle goes on for a bit longer, then we could bring in the next part. And then we could bring in that. So instead of going back to the listener's probably going to expect to come back to hear that sound, but instead they hit with the variation. And we can apply that same variation of picking pattern to this as well. So I could keep on going there, but hopefully this is starting to fire some ideas in your brain for your ideas, for adding variation to your idea. So now we have a good idea of how to make that idea more interesting. The next step is, well, how do we write more sections of our song from this initial idea? And that's what we're going to do in the next part of this system. So during my deep dive for the workshop, I was listening to a lot of math rock songs and trying to work out, well, how do they take an initial song idea and create more song ideas from that? I'm not gonna lie, it was a complete headache trying to work a lot of this out, but I was really glad I put in a lot of the effort because there was a lot that I learned. And from this I was able to create distinct approaches that a guitarist could use to create further sections for a song. In the workshop I go into more detail about those, but for the sake of simplicity for this video, I'm just going to share a few that you can use now. One of the most straightforward ways that we can create extra sections for our song is an approach I call the same idea, different approach. For example, we could take a strummed chord progression and play that using a picking pattern instead, or we could have a picking pattern chord progression and we can play that using strumming instead, vice versa. So an excellent example of this is the song Pool by the Japanese band Trico. So they have this strumming pattern in the introduction of the song. And then use the same idea, different approach, same chord progression, but they're picking it instead. And then it switches to this half time from 5/4 to 3/4. So we've applied the same idea, different approach again, if I could play and talk at the same time. But basically we've got 3 song sections from one idea. So that's the power of the same idea, different approach. Could we write an entire song this way? Well, I guess we could, but it would end up sounding a bit too similar. And therefore it's better to combine this with other approaches. And before we move on to look at another approach, let's do the same thing for our chord progression example. We're starting with a strumming pattern, so to apply the same idea, different approach, we could use that picking pattern instead. For a a slightly more complex but equally as effective in generating extra song sections for our song, we have what I call the variation on theme approach. This is where I discovered guitarists will take an idea, the theme of that idea, and then apply that to another idea within the song. So this is where we would have like a similar picking pattern that's taken and then applied to a different chord, let's say, that evolves the idea into another section. So for instance, if we take our, that strumming pattern that we have, maybe we want to take this and apply it again later in the song, so it's a variation on that theme. However, we probably don't want to do all the dead notes. We probably might want to use a new chord progression. So we could fumble around a while, find another chord progression. So for example here's one I made earlier. Let's say we're going to go a G major 9, E minor 9, sorry, I can't get my chords out today, and what's the last one? An F major 9. And I'm going to apply the theme of the original idea, i.e. the strumming pattern, to this, but I'm not going to put the dead notes in this time. And I already get the feeling of that. It sounds like maybe it's a middle section, maybe it's like a transitional section, within a song. But we don't know yet for sure because we haven't got all the other parts. We're just in the development phase at the moment. But this leads us on to the final step in this system. It's like, how do we connect these ideas? So for example, if we've got our picking pattern, right? How do we go from there to... The jump sounds quite jarring, right? And this is, like I said, the last part of this puzzle. This is where we are going to look at transitions. So essentially what we need here is some kind of glue to try and bring these ideas together. And let's look at some of the most common ways that math rock guitarists do this. As you already probably guessed, there are tons of ways that we can transition song ideas, basically how we can put them together. And in my deep dive into math rock songs, I did discover a number of ways, and again, I categorized those so guitarists could take them and apply them to their own song ideas. Let's just focus on one or two of these and apply it to the song idea that we've been creating through this video. One of the most common ways to transition between song sections is purposefully creating some kind of transitional idea to sandwich between the two sections. These could be extra little riffs, extra little chords. It could even just be strumming, a chord at a different dynamic level. Basically, all of these little things are going to signal to your listener that there is a change coming into another section. And these transitions can be either quite contrasting and jarring in nature, or they can be stylistic in choice, bridging the gap in a nice and pleasant way. It all depends on the feeling that you are going for. So let's look at adding a transitional idea between our first section, the chords, and that picking section there. So as I know at the moment, the way that I've written this part, we're going to end on this inversion here. This B major 9 inversion. So I'm going to use this to signal the change into the next section. You see there, what I did was ended with that strum like we do in the original idea, but I thought if I could take the pattern, same idea, different approach, and apply that to this last chord, that sets up that is the transition that signals to the listener that there is going to be a change here. And now we're into the second section. We also need to think about, is this idea too repetitive? Can we add some variation? Maybe we could add some stops like that, right? Or we could add add even, shorten, add even more of a pause to it. There's obviously tons of things we can do in the application there, but I'm starting to hear drums, I'm starting to hear how this section's going to flow, and making it more mathy in style by adding some stops and sudden stops and starts like that is, it's very math rock in nature, right? So that leads us on to how can we transition from this section into the third section of our song. And as we discovered, it was quite of a jarring transition, which is completely fine in math rock. In fact, a lot of math rock guitarists will make use of this abrupt change from section to section, and it can be wonderful, a wonderful contrasting way to change suddenly between song sections. But for my song, I don't want any jarring transitions, so to speak, so I'm going to make more of a stylistic choice. I'm going to find a transitional idea I can sandwich between these two, and it's probably going to be some kind of chord. So if I'm on this chord to begin with, I think I can use an idea to go from here to lead up to this chord here. So I'm going to put in this minor 9 chord here, this F sharp minor 9 chord, to get to this one. But we need to work out the rhythmic change here. Add some variation. Just off the top of my head with improvisation there, but I think that chord really works well there as my transitional idea. I'd have to hash it out a bit more, but I'm definitely onto something there. So we're now well on the way to finishing this song idea. We've generated 3 song ideas just in this session by using a few of these different approaches, looking at how making them more interesting by using some variation, and how we can effectively bridge the gap between these sections using some variation. And what I'm hoping is that by following this system, you're much more likely to end up with ideas that complement each other. You will also start wasting time by having a clearer direction to the songwriting process. You will also start to develop your own songwriting skills and your own unique voice on your instrument. And lastly, you're much more likely to avoid ending up with a song full of redundant ideas. There are plenty of other considerations as well, like the song structure itself, the direction that you're trying to take the song in, getting feedback on your ideas or self-assessing your own ideas. All of these I do go into detail in the workshop, so if you are interested in that, there's a link for that down below in the description.